Good morning, everyone. We're going to do a part 3 now on Hanan ben Abraham's work entitled James, Paul, and the Dead Sea Scrolls. But in part 3, which is the final part, is we're going to be revealing something that it's all due to Hanan ben Abraham's work. He has now finally put together the thesis that Eisenman had about the Habakkuk Pesher and proved that was the Dead Sea Scrolls recovery of the Evian work called the Habakkuk Pesher, the commentary on Habakkuk, where James stands in for the name Zadik in that book, and the spouter of lies. Well, we know who that would be, and that was James' nemesis, Paul. And it's clear it was a conflict between the two of them because it was over the issue of is faith what justifies under Habakkuk 2, verse 4, or is it rather faithfulness, emunah in Hebrew, which is in a sense of obedience? Is your obedience what justifies, or is it somehow some faith in facts that's going to save you? And James is very clear in his epistle, faith alone does not save you, to James 2, verse 24, but you have to have your works, your obedience on top of your faith. And if it isn't there, it's dead and useless, and it will not save you. Can it save you? He even says rhetorically. Anyway, but this is I call this episode Hanan ben Abraham's blockbuster continuation of Eisenman's path on the Dead Sea Scrolls. So he knows all about Habakkuk Pesher, but then he's going to tie in a few other scrolls that, frankly, I never had time to look at. And really, I'm astonished no one else has even advanced this at all. But it required someone who's Christian, who's literate in Hebrew, and could do the hard lifting work. And so we're just taking this and we're going to give all the thanks and thankfulness and appreciation to Hanan ben Abraham for having done this wonderful work. And it really comes to its fruition only in part 3. But if you don't watch parts 1 and 2, you may not know who James is, and that's important for that. You also won't know the conflict between James and Paul until you read that, not fully. And now it's going to all come together in this episode, part 3, the final part. All right, so we'll pick up where we left off after part 2, beginning with quotes from James. This is a quote from James chapter 3, verse 5. So also is the tongue a small member, yet it boasts of great things. See how large a forest is set on fire by such a small flame. Next, James 4, verses 14 to 15. If you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your heart, do not be arrogant and tell lies against the truth. Verse 15. This is not the wisdom that comes down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. And it does say, it's the Greek word daimoniotes. This is definitely demonic, is his point. Hanan then links the passage to excerpts in Galatians 1, verses 11 to chapter 3, verse 6. I communicated to them the gospel which I preach among the Gentiles, but privately to those reckoned to be important, lest somehow I should be running or had run in vain. But those who seemed to be important had nothing to add to me. And when James, Cephas, and John, Cephas is Peter, and John, those who seemed to be pillars, perceived the grace that was given to me, they gave to me and Barnabas the right hands of fellowship, that we should go to the heathen, and they unto the circumcision. Hanan makes an interjection there. He construes this to mean they didn't want to be around Paul and Barnabas. So they sent them off for those missions. Only they asked that we remember the poor, that is, the Ebionites, which is what I most intended to do. But when Peter came to Antioch, I opposed him to his face, for he stood condemned. For before certain men came from James, he used to eat with the Gentiles. But when they came, he drew back and separated himself, fearing the circumcision party. Obviously, he's identifying James that way, by the way. And with them, the rest of the Jews acted insincerely, so that even Barnabas was carried away with their dissimulation. I saw that they walked not uprightly according to the truth of the gospel. End of quote. Knowing that a man is, and then he goes on to another quote in Galatians that we're all familiar with. Knowing that a man is not justified by works of the law, but by faith in Jesus Christ, we have believed in Jesus Christ that we might be justified by the faith of Christ and not by works of the law. For by the works of the law shall no one be justified. Even Abraham believed God, and it was reckoned to him as righteousness. Now, keep that in mind, how clear he thinks that what Genesis says. It doesn't say that. The Septuagint has an ambiguity. It has the subject, it was counted, so you can't tell who's the subject. But when you look at the Hebrew, it's Abraham believed and counted it as righteousness to God. That's how it reads. There's no change of subject. And that's normal Hebrew syntax. The author starts again. Paul's followers are rather, quote, justified by Jesus' blood, Romans 5, verse 9. In 1 Corinthians 10, verse 16, he, Paul, bids that they, the Corinthians, drink it, the blood of Christ. Whether Paul is right or wrong is not being proposed here, only that this is the exact opposite of the teaching of James, who advises Gentiles, like God does in Genesis 9:4, to abstain from blood. Acts 15:29 also. And in this letter asks, quote, "Don't you realize, you vain man, that faith without works is useless? Was not Abraham our father justified by works when he offered his son Isaac on the altar?" You see that faith was active along with works, and faith was brought into completion by works, and the scripture was fulfilled, which says Abraham believed God, and it was reckoned to him as righteousness. It was reckoned to God as righteousness. James writes, "What does it profit, my brothers, if a man says he has faith and it doesn't have works? Can faith save him?" Rhetorical question, meaning no, it cannot save him. Faith alone cannot save him. That's what it's going to say in 24. We'll see in a second. "If a brother or sister is ill-clad and in lack of daily food, and one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, be warmed and filled,' without giving them the things they needed for the body, what does it profit? So faith by itself, if it doesn't have works, is dead." James 2, verses 14 to 23. And I would add there, James 2:24, which reads in the Mount C, "You see that a person is justified by works and not by faith alone." Next, Hanan reads James 1, verse 26. "If any man among you seems to be religious and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his own heart, this man's religion is vain." Then Hanan contrasts this with Romans 9, verses 2 to 4. Paul says this, "I bear them, Israel, record that they have a zeal of God, but not according to knowledge. For they, being ignorant of God's righteousness and going about to establish their own, have not submitted themselves to the righteousness of God. For Christ is the end of the law." So the way to get righteous, according to Paul, is you get rid of the law. So if you have no more law, there's no more sin. And I know that sounds crazy, but that's, if you read Romans 7, he says, without the law, I would not have known sin. So we no longer live by the letter of the law, we live by the Spirit. All things are lawful now, but not all things are expedient. So you just live by the Spirit of what's expedient. I mean, definitely, if you put together all his thoughts in a coherent mesh, this is what he's saying, is Christ is the end of the law, and that's how you become righteous. There's no more law. All right. Hanan connects this then to Galatians 3, verses 13 to 14. "Christ has redeemed us from the curse of the law, so that the blessing of Abraham might come on the Gentiles through Jesus Christ, that we might receive the promises of the Spirit through faith. For in Christ Jesus I've begotten you through the gospel. Therefore I beseech you, be followers of me." 1 Corinthians 4, verse 15 to 16. So pause. So Paul is saying, be followers of me. Why is he not saying follow the example of Jesus and live like he lived? Doesn't go there. Instead, it has to all be about Paul. James says this, "As the body without the Spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead also." James 2, verse 23. Again, I would add James 2:24. "For you see that a person is justified by works and not by faith alone." The author Hanan then quotes James 2, verse 26 to chapter 3, verse 14. Portions. "The tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great exploits. How great a forest is set ablaze by a small fire. And the tongue is a fire. So is the tongue among our members. It is a world of iniquity. It defiles the whole body and sets on fire the cycle of nature and is set on the fire of hell. The tongue can no man tame. It is an unruly evil, full of deadly poison. Who is a wise man and endued with knowledge among you? Let him show out of a good conversation his works with the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and contentiousness in your heart, do not boast and lie against the truth." Hanan then quotes a litany of passages of Paul subject to the words of James, meaning they fall under this condemnation of boasting. 2 Corinthians 11, verses 10 to 13. "Are they Hebrews? So am I. Are they Israelites? So am I. Are they the seed of Abraham? So am I. Are they the ministers of Christ? I speak as a fool. I am more. He's more of a minister than any of the apostles, just himself alone. The truth of Christ is in me. No man shall stop me of this boasting. The God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who is blessed forevermore, knows I am not lying." Why does he have to say that? That's adding more than a yes or no to your answer to be believed. Yes, it sounds like you're making an oath. I'm not lying. It's a promise. Hanan then quotes the "trust me, I'm not lying" passages in Paul. He cites 3 of them. There's a total of 6, but these are fine. "I say the truth in Christ and do not lie," Romans 9, verse 1. "I speak the truth in Christ and lie not," 1 Timothy 2:7. "Before God I do not lie," Galatians 1:20. Those are unnecessary for people who are telling the truth, by the way. You don't have to say those things to be believed. Hanan Ben Avraham continues, and to justify his preaching of living by faith alone, Paul cites Habakkuk's, quote, the righteous shall live by his faith in Romans 1:17. In an interpretation of the above Habakkuk, chapter 2, verse 4, the Dead Sea Scrolls found only 50 years ago in caves near Jericho tell us its interpretation, quote, concerns all doers of the law in the house of Judah, whom God will save from the house of judgment because of their works and their faith in the teacher of righteousness. This is in Habakkuk Pesher, commentary, chapter 7, verse 17 to 8, verse 3 in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I'm going to pause there for a second. We know from the work of Eisenman that the Habakkuk Pesher is a work of the Ebion, the poor. It has a conflict between someone who's called the Tzaddik, or the just one in Hebrew, translated into English. And then the opponent is the spout of lies. The spout of lies takes the position that Habakkuk 2:4 means you're saved by faith, you have justified by faith. And the Tzaddik takes the opposite position, that faith does not alone justify you. And boy, this is just coincidental. No, it's this document actually is dated to 50 AD by this expert, independent of Mr. Eisenman, and he says this is proof positive of what he's been saying all along, that this is a work of the Ebion Church of the first century. 50 AD is exactly right time to place it. Okay, so now we've come to the Blockbuster portion of the video. This is what Hanan ben Avraham says. The teacher of righteousness, or the righteous teacher, leads a messianic movement befuddled by, quoting now from the Habakkuk Pesher 10, verses 9 to 13, the following. The spouter of lies who leads many astray in order to build his city of vanity on blood, pause there, Hanan takes that word blood and he bolds it. And so I think he's trying to connect that up with Paul saying that the Corinthians should be drinking blood or eating blood. City of vanity and blood, and erect an assembly upon lying for the sake of his glory, tiring out many with a worthless service and instructing them in the works of lying, so that their works will be of emptiness, and they'll be brought to the same judgment of fire with which they insulted and vilified the elect of God. And the quote. I mean, so Paul, by the way, is vilifying and insulting Peter, right? And so this group is upset and don't have any fond words for this person. And let's continue. So Hanan continues. Unlike the spouter of lies, which she puts in quotes here, who led the simple astray, it says, according to the Micah Pesher fragment. To that fragment, it says, the righteous teacher, quote, expounded the law to his council and to all who freely pledged themselves to join the elect of God to keep the law in the council of the community, who shall be saved on the day of judgment. The author, Hanan, next returns to the Habakkuk Pesher, and he reads from chapter 2, verses 1 to 2, chapter 5, verse 12, and chapter 2, verse 3. It reads this way. Those who were unfaithful together with the liar, who did not listen to the word received by the righteous teacher from the mouth of God, and who were silent at the time of the chastisement of the righteous teacher, and did not aid him against the liar, who rejected the law in the midst of all the assembly, were unfaithful in the new covenant, in that they have not believed in the covenant of God and have profaned his holy name. Next, Hanan discusses the Damascus document, a work found in the 1890s and determined by top scholar Margaluth to be a Christian document. It has all the echoes of the Habakkuk Pesher. By the way, the Damascus document was found again in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So it was pegged even in the 1890s. That same document was determined to be a Christian document when the top scholars were examining its contents and who was talking about a new covenant and all this stuff. Now, just for your reference, in the future, I'm going to be doing a lot of work on the Damascus document. So I think it's a key thing that we can help Christians and Jewish people find a deeper connection to Jesus Christ because of these documents being found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And it's validated because it was found 60 years before it was in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and people thought then it was Christian document. So why are we not telling the world, hey, there it is. This proves the Dead Sea Scrolls were buried in the time, and it clearly is now proved, but other ways, was buried in the time of just prior to the fall of the Temple of Jerusalem to protect all these documents. But I digress. Anyway, so Hanan says, in the Damascus document, chapter 1, verse 5 to chapter 2, verse 1, and then he's going to quote from chapter 8, verse 48 to 57, the following, that God had, quote, visited them and caused the root of planting to grow from Israel and from Aaron, the royal tribe and the priestly tribe, to inherit his land and to prosper on the good things of his earth, And they understood their sinfulness and knew that they were guilty men. And they were like blind men and groped for the way. That is the name of early Christianity, is it not, in the book of Acts? For 20 years. And God considered their works. This is still reading from the Damascus document. And God considered their works because they sought him with a whole heart and raised up for them a teacher of righteousness to guide them in the way of his heart. And he made known to the last generation what he would do to the last generation, to the congregation of traitors who were turners aside from the way. This is the time about which it is written, like a straying heifer. Thus did Israel stray. Hosea chapter 4, verse 16. That's bracketed insert. When the man of scoffing arose. So in the Damascus document, we have the same mention of the man of scoffing, just like we had in the Habakkuk Pesher, who poured over Israel the waters of lying and caused them to wander in a trackless waste with no way. See how the difference between there's the way and there's the no way. Bringing low the everlasting heights, abolishing the pathways of righteousness and removing the boundary markers which the first marked out as their inheritance. I mean, that's really talking about abolishing the law. It's the same thing. So this spouter of lies, this scoffer, he's the same person as in the Habakkuk Pesher. The Damascus document continues. For which reason he called down on them the curses of his covenant. This is the spouter of lies, the man of scoffing. For they sought smooth things and preferred illusions, watched for loopholes and chose the easiest way. And they justified the wicked and condemned the righteous. And they transgressed the covenant and broke the law. And they banded together against the life of the righteous one, James just, and against all walkers in perfection. They pursued them with the sword and attempted to divide the people. Their works were unclean before him. It continues the Damascus document at chapter 1, verse 5 to 2, verse 1, and 8, verse 48 to 57. We read, all among the members of the covenant who transgress the boundary of the law shall be cut off. However, all those who hold fast to these statutes, coming and going in accordance with the law, shall listen to the voice of the righteous teacher and not desert the laws of righteousness, and they will see his salvation. By the way, in Hebrew, that word salvation was Yeshua. They will see Yeshua, and in English would be Jesus. So there's a remarkable statement in the Damascus document. They will see Yeshua. And you can translate Yeshua as the salvation of Yah, but it literally is his name at the same time. Interesting. Who did it really talk about? Anyway, because they took refuge in his holy name. Before I move on, I just want to emphasize that Damascus document, also found in the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1947, was found in the 1890s, and it was concluded at that time by Mark Luth, and actually the discoverer of it, who was Jewish, who at first thought it was a Jewish document, and then he concluded, no, this is a Christian document. In 1890s, they concluded this was a Christian document. Well, you could see it's talking about a person who's named Yeshua, and you have salvation in his name. I mean, this is kind of important. And so that is a definitely important text that he's extracted from the Damascus document. Okay, so Hanan ben Avraham continues his narration. Like the Jerusalem assembly led by James, the above community refers to itself as the poor, the Ebionites, interpreting that a passage in Psalm 37, quote, concerns the congregation of the poor who shall possess the whole world as an inheritance, end of quote. That's in the Dead Sea Scroll document called Psalm 37, Pesher, that means a commentary on Psalm 37, at 3:10, just for an example. And their leader suffers the same death as James, destruction at the hands of the, quote, the wicked priest who pursued after the righteous teacher to swallow him in his hot anger in his exiled house. He will be paid the reward which he rewarded the poor. Habakkuk Pesher, chapter 6, verse 4, and then goes and continues to 7, verse 3. So it's amazingly accurately talking about James the Just and what he went through in his death. Let's continue. The Talmud, a compilation of Jesus' Jewish legal traditions, tells us that in the time of Jesus and James, quote, the Sanhedrin was exiled and took up residence, end of quote, outside the temple. To see that in the time of Jesus and James, that's when it happened. The Sanhedrin was exiled and it could not operate inside the temple, it had to operate outside it. And this is in Talmudic citation B.Shab, period 15a, R, period H, period 31a-b, comma, and a period z 8b. Those are the Talmudic sites if you want to look that up. Next, the author of the article, Hanan, explains that Eusebius in Ecclesiastical History 2.23 records that Hegesippus explains that James, preaching to the Jerusalem masses from the temple on Passover, was asked by a voice in the crowd, "Righteous one, whose word we are all obliged to accept, the people are going astray after Jesus who was crucified. So tell us, what is meant by the door of Jesus?" End of quote. And then it continues. The Ecclesiastical History continues. And James replied as loudly as he could, "Why do you question me about the Son of Man? I tell you, he is sitting in heaven at the right hand of the great power and will come on the clouds of heaven." Next, according to Josephus, the Jews, this is in a work called by Josephus called Jewish War 6.310-15. According to Josephus, the quote, Jews' chief inducement to go to war was an ambiguous oracle found in their sacred writings, announcing that at that time, a man from their country would become the king of the world. This is the ancient star prophecy found in Numbers 24, verse 17 to 19. And we know Christians applied it to Jesus from Justin Martyr, who was born in 100 CE and died in 165 CE, in Justin's dialogue at 106. Quote, "A star shall come out of Jacob, a scepter shall rise out of Israel. He shall smite the temples of Moab and destroy all the children of Seth, and Israel shall accomplish mighty deeds." This term of the king of the world in the star prophecy also occurs 3 times in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and in the Damascus document is interpreted to apply to, quote, "the prince of the whole congregation, and with his standing up," literally arising in the sense to be resurrected like the dry bones in Ezekiel 37, verse 10, "he shall utterly destroy all the sons of Seth." Now that is the Damascus document in the Dead Sea Scrolls, section 7, verses 19 to 21. But do not forget the Damascus document was concluded by Margolith and the original finder of it in the 1890s to be the work of Christians. And the author of this article now will look at the Dead Sea Scroll entitled "The War of the Sons of Light Against the Sons of Darkness," and he's going to extract out of it passages which, again, just are remarkably Christian in nature. It begins as follows. He says, "In the war of the sons of light against the sons of darkness," in the Dead Sea Scrolls, is interpreted to mean, quote, "By the hand of your Messiah who discerned your testimonies, you have revealed to us the times of the battles of your hands, so that you may glorify yourself in front of your enemies and overthrow the legion of worthlessness, the 7 nations of vanity, by the hand of the poor ones, by the Ebion of your redemption. Because by the hand of the poor, by the Ebion, and those bent in the dust, will the enemies from all the lands and the mighty ones of the peoples be humbled. The glorious King is with us, together with the holy ones. The mighty host of angels are under his command, and the valiant warrior is among our assembly. They are as clouds of dew covering the earth, as a shower of rain shedding judgment on all that grows on earth. Rise up, O hero. Blessed be the God of Israel, who keeps mercy towards his covenant and the appointed times of salvation with the people he has delivered. Rise up, O God of gods. Raise yourself in might, King of kings. May all the sons of darkness scatter before you. The light of your greatness will shine forth as gods and men." End of quote. This is war. He cites War of the Sons of Light Against the Sons of Darkness in columns 11 to 14. All right, so next we're going to read, he's going to quote from a document, a fragment actually, called "The Messiah of Heaven and Earth Fragment." He's going to quote from 1, 2, 12, -3, 1. It's going to blow your mind, and I'm going to show you a little research before I let you go, that this is, by Tabor's standards, it says it's strikingly similar to passages in Mark and Luke. I mean, so striking. And of course, in Christianity, we should know there is a unique literature that we use expressions that were found nowhere else in Judaism. So the question is this a Christian document? Again, the Messiah of heaven and earth. So listen to it. "Come, you rich, weep, howl over the miseries that are coming on you. Your riches have rotted, and your clothes have become moth-eaten. Your gold and silver are corroding away, and the same corrosion will be like a testimony against you, and shall eat your flesh like fire. It is burning fire that you stored up as treasure for the last days." Then continues. Look, the hire of the workers who have moved your fields, which you fraudulently held back, cries out, and the cries of the reapers have reached the ears of the Lord. And what would the Messiah do? According to the Messiah fragment, Dead Sea Scrolls, he would heal the sick, resurrect the dead, and to the meek announce glad tidings. He will lead the holy ones, he will shepherd them, and the law will be pursued. That's this Messiah fragment. But now I'm going to digress and read to you the entire fragment, because it's not that long, from Tabor. The heavens and the earth will listen to his Messiah, and none therein will stray from the commandments of the holy ones. Seekers of the Lord, strengthen yourselves in his service. All you hopeful in your heart, would you not find the Lord in this? For the Lord will consider the pious, the Hasidim, and call the righteous by name. Over the poor his spirit will hover, and will renew the faithful with his power, and he will glorify the pious on the throne of the eternal kingdom. He who liberates the captives restores sight to the blind, straightens a word beginning with B, but it's missing otherwise. And forever I will cleave to the hopeful and in his mercy. And the fruit, something's missing, will not be delayed for anyone. And the Lord will accomplish glorious things which have never been as something's missing. For he will heal the wounded and revive or resurrect the dead and bring good news to the poor. He will lead the uprooted and knowledge and smoke and more missing words. And that's it. Michael O. Wise did the translation in 1992 and it was published, but it went into a black hole and nobody's paid attention to it until look at it. It's 2022. Tabor is noticing it. It's just, he says it's actually recently, he calls it a new Dead Sea Scroll fragment, but it's been there for 20 years plus. Now, what he points out is these are has a very similar statement as we see that statement. For he will heal the wounded, resurrect the dead, and proclaim glad tidings to the poor. Listen to the statement in Luke 7 and Matthew 11, synthesized by Tabor. Go and report to John what you have seen and heard. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear. And this is what he bolds. The dead are raised, the poor have the glad tidings preached to them. That's exactly the same words. Exactly the same words in the fragment, the Messiah fragment, as if it's quoting the New Testament. Could it be? Could it be? All right, let's continue. So Hanan ben Avraham resumes. Acts 15, verses 23 to 33, informs us the apostles wrote letters to the Gentiles in, quote, Antioch in Syria and southeastern Turkey, informing them of what they were expected to do as Christians. And in light of this, it is interesting that pieces of two letters addressed to someone far away and entitled First and Second Letters on Works Reckoned as Righteousness, or otherwise sometimes called the MMT, were found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. And they are stating as follows. This is the end of days when those in Israel are to return to the law of God with all their heart, never to turn back again. Meanwhile, the wicked will increase in wickedness. Remember the kings of Israel and understand their works. Whoever of them feared the law was saved from sufferings. When they sought the law, then their sins were forgiven them. Remember David, he was a man of pious works, and he also was saved from many sufferings and forgiven. And finally, we earlier wrote you in our first letter about some of the works of the law which we reckoned for your own good and for that of your people. For we see that you possess discernment and knowledge of the law. Consider all these things and beseech him to grant you proper counsel and to keep you far from evil thoughts and the counsel of worthlessness. Then you will rejoice at the end time when you find some of our words were true. Thus it will be reckoned to you as of righteousness, your having done what is upright and good before him, for your own good and for that of Israel. End of quote. Then, this author of the article continues, surviving into the 4th century Christian era, Ebionites, whose lost gospel of the Hebrews venerated James, were viewed with disdain by their Orthodox Christian contemporaries and considered heretics by Eusebius's time because, as he puts it, quote, they regarded Jesus as plain and ordinary, a man esteemed as righteous through growth of character and nothing more, the child of a normal union between a man and Mary, and they held that they must observe every detail of the law. That's Eusebius, Ecclesiastical History 3.27. Now, Hanan ben Avraham goes on to read from the Habakkuk Pesher one more time, and this appears to involve a prophetic statement by James inside the Habakkuk Pesher. in my estimation. And this is a prophecy that there's going to be a time period when people who are following Christ, think they're following Christ, will be ignorant, unaware who the spouter of lies is, who this character is, and the damage he's doing. But in the end of time, his nature will be revealed to the people. Let's listen. For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of God, of the glory of the Lord, like waters covering the sea. The interpretation of the passage is that in their return to God, the spout of lying and afterwards this knowledge, like the waters of the sea, will be abundantly revealed to them. Habakkuk 10, beginning of verse 14 to Habakkuk 11, verse 1, or passage 1. So in other words, the knowledge of the glory of the Lord is going to grow, and then when they return to God, the spout of lying will be abundantly revealed to them. So this is a reward for righteousness, that at the end of time, or a certain period of time, when people will be revealed the fact that who is the spout of lies and what his role has been. And if we haven't noticed, there's been a huge cover up. In fact, there was 40 years of suppression of all these records, and that these records were in the control or manipulation of the Catholic Church, in effect. And that's why only scholars they approved would write on it, and they would misdirect people about the Essenes and all these other options instead of what was most palpably on its face, the Christian Church. That's what these records were of, but not what we wanted to hear. This was the Ebionite period. This is when the church was run by the apostles, and that's not favorable to Paul. And the Catholic Church depends on Paul. Why? Because Paul's the only one who got rid of Sabbath. 3 times he says it's gone: Colossians, Galatians, and Ephesians. All right. I think that ends this. And so to me, this is a blockbuster fact. All these connections between the Dead Sea Scrolls, particularly the Damascus document, the Messiah fragment, that was something I've never seen ever even mentioned. I think I did a little bit, but it was never brought out this clearly. And Tabor is only talked about at the beginning of 2022, even though it was found in 1992. So there's been 30 years of delay of anybody paying any attention to it. So it's clearly a problem. Why did another 30 years have to go by? So we had a 40-year delay, and then we had 30 years of ever telling us there's literally, apparently, a quote of the New Testament, unless it's an extraordinary coincidence, okay? But we know it isn't, because we have all the other proof, all the other texts, the Damascus document and the works of righteousness documents, the Habakkuk Pesher, all of these things just are piled up. There's so many Christian documents in this thing. That's why the Catholic Church held it back from the world. They didn't want the exposure that they had turned their backs on the true church, the Ebion, and turned towards Constantine and his corrupt view of the future. All right, God bless everybody. Hope that helped you. Episode. All right, God bless you. Take care. Ciao, bye.